Welcome to the TA Disruptors live webinar. We're going to give it just a few moments to let a few more people join. But while we're waiting, as people join, if they want to put into the chat where they're dialing in from, it's always interesting to see the different locations, whether in the UK or beyond, that people are coming into these sessions with. So do use the chat and drop in where you're from, and we will get this going soon. See if I can see the chat coming up. Here we go. That has been activated. Oh, we've got somebody saying hello, MT. Good number of people are joining now. So we have an exciting session ahead of us today, and I'm going to be introducing our panelists shortly. But this is going to be an exciting and interesting session on AI, and I thought that would be highly appropriate rather than the normal way that we introduce these webinars, that I would get my digital twin, and I would love it if somehow there was a magic pill that enabled me to look like this. But here is Digital Robert introducing this webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Robert Newry, Chief Explorer at Arctic Shores, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's TA Disruptors Live webinar. We will be discussing the impact of AI on recruitment, and we have lined up an exciting panel for you, from an HR tech AI expert to a leading European TA consultant to a practitioner from one of the largest UK government departments. This is a topic on all of our minds, and the pace of change is staggering, such that it is hard to know what is real and what is not.
So amazingly, that took 5 minutes for me to create. And if you start thinking now too that this is a piece of software that literally overlays my voice, lip syncs, and what I love too, not just lip syncs, you could see the whole expression in there, eyebrows, face. I mean, it was incredible how realistic it is. And this was a recorded one, but where the technology is running now is that this can be done live. So this same capability that you've just seen, you could overlay a version of me, you could have me speaking in German, you could have me interacting in this webinar live too. This is how incredible the pace of change is. So on that note, before we sort of kick off the webinar on this and talk about this, a little bit of introduction about Arctic Shores. I founded it 10 years ago on the principle that understanding people was better by asking them to do something rather than to tell you how they might do something. And this is what the mission of Arctic Shores has been about. How do you discover true potential? And many of you will know that scrapping the CV has been a particular area of passion for me and discussion over the last few years. I feel it's time to move on from that and to look at new ways of understanding potential, and AI is certainly enabling that discussion in a way that hasn't been there before. In the 10 years we've been going, we've worked with 350 different companies. We have had more than 3 million candidates through our platform. And as you can see from some of the names below, we've worked with some really leading organizations across the world. And the bit that I'm most proud about is that we have helped more than 50,000 uncovered potentials get hired into these organizations. So on to the topic of discussion today. So what's the impact of AI going to be on recruitment, and why we are at a pivotal point in time and the need for change has never been greater. And I am very excited to be able to welcome the panel that we have put together today. Ranges from, and we wanted to have that range for you today, from somebody who has specialized a lot in AI and its impact in HR tech, to a European talent acquisition consultant as well, to get sort of broader perspective, and also a practitioner, somebody who's in the thick of it, and in the thick of it from a public sector, which has all sorts of additional constraints and things to consider compared to those of us in the private sector. So on that note, I would like now to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And if we start off with Andrea, and then if you could hand over to Siobhan and then Martin. Andrea.
Thank you, Robert. I'm Andrea. I'm based out of Berlin, in Germany. And yes, as Robert said, I think I'm the European that he mentioned too. I've been in talent acquisition for over 15 years. And one of the things that I put most effort and attention to was efficiency and operational excellence, which drove me at some point in writing an article, which is really quite controversial by now. It's 85 problems, which I found with Josh Bersin's approach to AI in talent acquisition. I'm a principal talent partner turned consultant after most of my career was in corporate. And I also run Germany's biggest talent community, which is called Talent Crunch. We are over 3,500 people. And now I have to hand over to
Siobhan.
Siobhan, please take it over.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Siobhan. I'm the talent acquisition AI lead at HMRC. So I lead a small AI and innovation team where we're responsible for developing and deploying innovative tech solutions to our TA process. And of course, also recognising where it's not always appropriate as well. A big part of what we focus on additionally to that is very much the people side of adoption of this new technology. So helping people to upskill and to confidently use the tech tools that we deploy. So giving our colleagues that AI literacy. And of course, that has extended as well to our candidates with our guidance on the use of AI in the recruitment process as well. So we're a real mix of tech and people-y type backgrounds, but of course as well forming lots of multidisciplinary teams when we require that deep technical expertise as well. And with that, I'll hand over to Martin.
Brilliant. Thanks, Siobhan.
Thanks, Siobhan. And thank you very much for having me today, Robert and Arctic Shores. So my name is Martin Redstone. I have been in the recruitment industry for just over 19 years now. Several years ago, about 8 years ago, I started getting more involved in the world of AI and automation within recruitment. 6 years ago, I launched my AI and automation consultancy, which is called PeopleBots, and specializing in conversational AI as well, of which I'm the chair of the Global Conversational AI Summit held in Berlin every year. And most recently also launched my own product called GenAssess, which is all about helping recruiters to assess AI literacy and prompting skills in candidates as they come through the funnel as well. So all in, I've spent the last several years working with TA professionals on helping them to enable and take advantage of AI and automation in their processes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin and Siobhan and Andrea are on that. So great lineup and some really interesting and different perspectives on this topic. So we're going to split the webinar now into 3 sections based on the 3 big themes that AI is going to impact all of us in TA and beyond in our organizations. So the first is the AI-enabled candidate, which many people are experiencing and seeing a significant increase in the number of applications, which in many cases is overloading their recruitment process. Then the second topic we're going to look into is how we as TA leaders, managers, reacting to the AI-enabled candidate, but also how are we using AI in our recruitment processes to help us not just tackle the volume, but also to deliver efficiencies, because we know one of the major trends in the last 12 months is that TA teams are being asked to do more with less. And then finally, there is also an important element to consider around this is how AI is going to change the way that skilled workers, knowledge workers deliver their value. And therefore the things that we are going to look for from people and the value that they're going to provide in work in a world where AI is doing a lot of things that we used to value is going to change. And so that's going to have impact on what we consider to be good and useful value in the people that we're about to hire. So on the first topic, let's get into that in a couple of slides before I will introduce a poll, and then we'll get our panel perspectives on this. But the flood of AI submissions and candidate applications has been something that is a constant source of discussion, concern within TA teams in the last few months. And here is just an example of a few, and this is just a few of the tools that candidates are using in order to improve and in some cases automate their application for jobs. And the point about this and showing this is that the power dynamic has shifted. In the past, somebody had to manually go and put in a CV or an application form, and the technology power sat with us in recruitment and TA. But now candidates have access to the same level of technology and artificial intelligence that we do in TA. And so the change in that dynamic means that it's not just a flood of applications we're getting, but it's also the way the candidates are able to manipulate, enhance, change, automate their applications as well. And this is probably, you know, the next biggest thing outside of just the volume of applications that are being thrown out there, automated and personalized to job descriptions as well, is that there are many people out there who are using AI to outwit the tools that we used to have in order to differentiate candidates and to decide who do we bring forward to interview and who don't we. And if you weren't familiar with this, but this blew up over LinkedIn and Reddit and a few other places a couple of weeks ago. Roy Lee was a Columbia student who managed to develop his own piece of AI to live answer a technical interview assessment that was done live by using the same technical software application. Amazon used it, Meta used it, TikTok used it, and he was able to ace that test live without them realizing it and got job offers from all of them on the basis that he was an outstanding candidate. And actually, he's pretty smart, but his point was for $20, he was offering this out, and anybody who wasn't especially smart would be able to use these tools. So we have these big challenges now that we have to think about with the AI-enabled candidate, their ability to submit without having to put much effort in, and their ability to enhance their capabilities beyond which they might normally be capable of. So before I throw, this topic out to the AI-enabled candidate to our panel here, a quick poll of everybody on the line now, if we are able to bring that up, I will stop sharing. So if we can open the poll on the first of our polls on on what guidance is everybody doing or not doing on their career sites. Is the poll showing up, by the way? Because I can't see. Oh, here we go. So if you could, everybody on the call, tick your where you stand on that. That would be very helpful. I'll have to rely on Ben and my team to share because we can't see the results on this. But it is one of the things that we know that many people are struggling with, this fast pace of change, and in many cases, most people are not giving advice to candidates on this, and that of course has huge implications. So do we want to close the poll now, Ben? And I don't, oh, here we go. Look, it's come up here. So 14% are, 7 out of 50 are giving comprehensive guidance. Some are giving limited guidance. The vast majority, 62%, are not giving any guidance at all. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn to Siobhan, because I know this is something that you feel passionately about, this point about guidance. So perhaps could you kick off and share with us, do you see the AI-enabled candidate as a challenge, and how have you at HMRC been dealing with that?
Of course. The AI-enabled candidate, it is a challenge from a volume perspective, and I'm sure there's many organisations that are facing the same challenge as us, where we are being overwhelmed with applications for roles. I know a while back I'd mentioned on the TA Disruptors podcast that personally a role within my team, just for one role, we received around 840 applications, and that certainly isn't a one-off across the business. So it's quite frustrating for hiring managers to deal with these volumes, and when they're reading the applications, they are very poorly generated applications, again adding to the frustration. So rather than taking the option of do nothing and see what happens, or to try and ban the use of AI, which is a whole new world of problems in itself in terms of trying to police that, and of course not wanting to disadvantage any group of candidates, we decided that actually what we need to do is we need to provide some comprehensive guidance to our candidates. And I think ultimately we are a people function, and part of our role as a people function is to guide people through the recruitment process. So why would we not guide them on this new technology? And it's still very much a period of adjustment for candidates with all this new technology that is available to them. And there's so many different tools coming out constantly. I suppose for themselves, they're just trialing out, what works, what's best for them, what they like, what's getting results for them. And I think, I suppose, moving sort of as it matures, I really feel that any candidates that are just using these AI tools, particularly ones that profess to provide them with personalized responses, but then actually those personalized responses are very much the same. And when you're a hiring manager reading hundreds of the same application, they're certainly not personalised then. Hopefully candidates will start to realise, you know what, this is not getting me the results that I want. I am not achieving my goal of getting the job that I'm going for here. Or if I have managed to get through the application process, I'm falling down at interview because either the AI has made this application where it has inflated my skills and experience, and actually, if I do some internal reflection here, I'm probably not the best candidate for this. Then that they're just not going to get it. But equally, they might be a great candidate, but they've just relied on AI too much at the detriment of their application. And then because it's been very much the same application as hundreds of others, they've then not managed to get through to that next stage. That was the whole reason why we decided to initially create some guidance for our candidates, and we've shared that internally as well, so our vacancy holders are very much aware of what is expected of candidates and the guidance that we've produced to them as well, and that's to then just to really make sure that we are a united front in terms of our thinking across the whole of the organisation.
It's really helpful. Thanks, Siobhan. And so, what you've been clear about, and I think, it's so important for many organizations around this, is that you can't just rely on candidates to figure it out. I've heard a lot of people just say, well, if they've used AI poorly, then too bad for them, that they haven't used it well. And yet, there's a lot of people using AI to help level the playing field a bit. If you're dyslexic or dyspraxic, then why wouldn't you use it to help you improve the way that you write and fill in application forms? And so it's giving good advice is absolutely critical to this, because you can't just assume that poor use of AI is deliberately manipulative or bad. And I think that's one key thing. You mentioned too about banning AI, and that's a whole separate thing. And I know, Martin, that's something that you have been quite outspoken about from the beginning. Perhaps you could just give us your perspective on why the instinctive response by many companies to the arrival of the AI-enabled candidate was just say any use of AI will automatically remove you from the process and be seen as bad. So, Martin, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you. So I suppose we better start with the fact that normally in the world of recruitment and TA, we're slightly behind consumer behavior. And so what that's meant is we saw the rapid adoption of ChatGPT, 100 million users in 5 weeks. And that was because OpenAI put a lovely conversational interface on the front of quite a powerful language model, and everyone thought it was magic. And what that meant was this rapid adoption of a technology that we weren't ready for, we weren't prepared for. And we were, dare I say, caught with our trousers down a little bit when it came to this. So instinctively, we're going to put up our defenses. Rather than stepping back, having a think about it and strategizing, we immediately put up our defenses. And what we saw coming out very, very rapidly was vendors who were pitching, we can tell you who's been using ChatGPT in the application process. We can help you highlight those kind of people who are cheating. We can help you ban it, etc., etc. And like you said, I've been quite a visceral proponent of that way of doing things since the inception of ChatGPT. And there's a few reasons for that. There's a few technological reasons and there's a few ethical reasons. Firstly, you're not going to stop it. It's a tsunami that's coming your way. So rather than trying to push back against it, swim with it, and start thinking exactly in the way that Siobhan has done. How can we adopt it? How can we enable it? How can we signpost for it? Now, from a technology perspective, it's nigh on impossible to bring about and to work out who's been using ChatGPT and who hasn't. And the reason for that is the use of text classifiers. So OpenAI brought out their own classifier in January, 2 months after ChatGPT was launched. It never got better than 26% accurate. So what we're saying there is that ultimately, even OpenAI, the people who create ChatGPT, cannot any better than 26% accurately detect whether somebody has been using AI. And there's a lot of technological reasons for that, you know, and you mentioned earlier about things like neurodiverse candidates using tools like ChatGPT, but ultimately ChatGPT is very methodical. So there can be false positives, false negatives, all those kind of things. The challenge there is that if you wrongly identify the use of ChatGPT or other AI tools because somebody writes very methodically, etc., and kick them out the process, you've got legal issues ahead of you, you've got all those kind of things. And there's also lots and lots of research that's happened over the last 6 months around what we call the human ChatGPT and AI detector. Quite famously, you know, universities, I think it was Reading University, you know, through lots of AI created assessments into the mix, and professors and lecturers couldn't ascertain that correctly either, even though they were saying we can work out who's been using AI and who hasn't. So the concept of both a technological way of assessing whether somebody's been using it, or even a human way, it's all full of errors that are going to cause you problems. So that's kind of why people immediately push back against it and try to defend against it, but also why it just doesn't work.
Yeah, really helpful and some really good insights in there, Martin, on that one. And just to bring this to life, you know, I was talking with a law firm the other day where a candidate was ringing around to say, do you use AI detection tools? And they said, why? And she said, well, I've just been told that my application for a summer internship at a leading law firm was rejected because I'd used AI, and I hadn't used AI. So I now don't want to waste my time applying to organizations if they are using AI detection tools, because I'm neurodiverse and I'm just going to be removed from the process. And it was, you know, really quite a sort of shocking story. So these things are real. Andrea, one last thought from you. What are you advising your clients? What's sort of European perspective on this? Are you seeing it as a big problem, the AI-enabled candidate, across people you work with, and how are you advising them to deal with this?
Maybe not as much in terms of volume. There will be roles where they will struggle, especially still in technology. And the stories I've seen on LinkedIn are horrendous, with people faking their presence, literally through things like Hey Jen, the one that you've just shown us, right? And then there are fake people taking interviews. I wanted to remind people of something which is a bit more lighthearted, is that Anthropic, right, which released Claude, the ChatGPT, one of the early competitors, is one of the companies who prohibited their candidates to use AI when applying for their company, which I found absolutely ridiculous. But in order to let's try and avoid that as much as possible, because I think a couple of things. One, there are these platforms you showed us earlier, which people can use to apply in masses. It's wonderful to have companies which are really thoughtful about educating people. Okay, if you are going to apply and if you're going to use AI, this is our guidance. However, we have Easy Apply on LinkedIn, we have Indeed, we have Monster, we have plenty of platforms where people apply, and there is no guidance there. And these tools would normally target these platforms and apply in masses. So I think there must be way more education, and we should talk way more about it in order to normalize it. Number one. Number two, the organizations themselves should have automated initial screening processes coming in. You have applicants coming in, you should send an initial screening right after that, and it can be automated. And then make sure that your processes are watertight. And I think that's on us in talent acquisition, in order to ensure that, okay, let's say you passed the initial screening, you passed the automated screening, so to speak, but our processes should be watertight in order to avoid as much as possible any fake false positives. I think these are the things that would come to mind straight away, to keep it as short as I can.
No, that's wonderful. Really good thoughts. And, you know, I think clearly we all concur on the guidance piece, and very interesting then on our own processes and how to keep that watertight. And actually that segues really nicely into the second topic actually that we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to move in to that now, is how should we as recruiters be using AI, and I think that's as important as, you know, how we deal with the AI enabled candidate. And I'm just bringing up on the screen something from Eightfold AI that was being used by a customer of Arctic Siemens, and this is a very typical use now of AI by recruiters to try and solve some of these issues around tackling volumes and efficiencies. And one of the number one applications we're seeing for AI on this is matching. So let's use AI to analyze skills, job descriptions, and then AI will go out and search the internet and find and stack rank all these appropriate candidates for you based on their CV and or their LinkedIn profile or monster profile or whatever it might be. There are clearly some implications around that, and we'll talk about that in a second, and be great to get your thoughts on it too. But also, I think it's important, going back to that story I told earlier of that other the candidate in the legal sector, about we have to be clear. So yes, we have to be watertight, but we also have to be clear, because this is what candidates are worried about, how, and explain how we are using AI. Are we using AI to screen your initial application? If so, how? Because this is the number one concern from candidates too. So we've got a small percentage, albeit growing, who are probably using it for manipulative cases, but there's a lot of people who are using AI for perfectly legitimate reasons, and they are really worried about whether their application will be rejected or not. And here's just one classic example of this, and then I'll hand over to the panel. One student asked me, if I see an application for why would you like to work for Siemens, for example, and I put into ChatGPT, why would I like Siemens? And I asked ChatGPT to help me refine that. And then I copied it from ChatGPT and dropped it into the application form for Siemens. Is that bad use of AI, or is that even use of AI that you as a recruiter are going to detect? And they just don't know. So it's not just good use and bad use, but it is also explaining how you as TA teams are using AI, and whether things like copying and pasting from ChatGPT is something that's detectable and is therefore something that they should or shouldn't do. So on that note, I think we have one more poll here before I go back to the panel on this. So here we go. The poll has come up. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So if before we go to the panel and get their thoughts on use of AI in the selection process. If you could share with us on this poll where you sit in your organization in using AI, and then we'll get some thoughts from our panelists on that. So I'll give it another few seconds. It'll be fascinating to see where everybody is on this. Okay, Ben, if you could close the poll now and show us where everybody ended up, that would be super helpful. Here we go. So we have a couple of people who are using AI to screen CVs. Be very interesting to get the panel's thoughts on that too. Some are using it to source candidates. That's a very classic one. A few more are using it to automate it, but not screen them. So interesting that kind of differentiation. But most people, again, similar to the first poll, most people are still experimenting and haven't used this. So I imagine they'd be very interested on how those people are using AI in their processes. So why don't we this time kick off with Martin? What's your take on recruiters using AI, and what are some of the things that you would encourage or discourage around that?
Well, that's a very wide-ranging question. Going back to your point that you made just before the poll, the first thing I would say is all of the regulation that's out there globally. There are tons and tons of it, and it's becoming ever more disparate globally. But I would say that the majority of the regulation out there is centered on lots of key things and all that have it in common. And two of those are transparency and explainability. And I actually think, and I talk a lot about the other side, which is, candidates absolutely being very concerned about AI scoring their CVs and AI doing this and AI doing that, when the vast majority of the time it's not correct. So I actually think that if we had a part on our career site which says how do we use technology in our recruitment process, and we're a lot more transparent about it, that would actually create a much better immediate relationship between recruiters and candidates, not just that organization, just in general, where people start understanding that there's no magic ATS that immediately auto rejects people, and the vast majority of the time it's human reviewed. But so that's the start. The next bit is when I'm working with my clients, we go through a framework which is crawl, walk, and run. You can't run before you can walk, and you can't walk before you can crawl. So when you are implementing AI and automation, think about crawling first. Look at use cases that are low risk. And I mean low risk from a business perspective, low risk from a compliance perspective, from a regulation perspective, from a data security perspective, all those kind of things. But low hanging fruit as well. So what's low risk, but what can make a massive impact? So we're talking about things like FAQ chatbots on the career site to answer questions about applications or the company or those kind of things. Getting to the point where scheduling, transcription, things that are really easy to implement, that are high value from a low hanging fruit perspective, but really low risk. And that's what I always recommend. Start with the basics. Don't go big bang. Do things one at a time. Prove the value, but start from the real basics of the foundation of transparency and explainability. Tell your candidates where technology is being used in the process, how it's being used, and also what you're doing with their data as well.
Brilliant. Great advice. And I love that point about transparency and explainability. And I imagine, Andrea, that is something that you probably have some thoughts on, and particularly in relation to the EU AI Act, which is clearly something many people need to understand and factor into all of this. So, Andrea, I'd love to hear your perspectives on this.
I'm really happy Martin already touched on the transparency piece, because I think it is essential. And yes, this is something I've spoken a lot about lately, the EU AI Act, because I think for us working in the people scene, talent scene, it is essential that we familiarize ourselves with what this means. And for anyone listening in who is maybe not a recruiter and has ever been worried about having their application rejected by AI, it is illegal. It's as simple as that. However, I may be now a devil's advocate. I don't know, or I may share a controversial view on this, but we have ATSs which have the capability of scoring or highlighting CVs we want to screen, let's say screen in instead of screening out. And then the rest of them, which are marked as maybe 50% fit or non-fit or what's or not, the expectation and the regulation would say it must be overviewed. It must be reviewed by a human before they're being rejected. Now, my question is that really being done? The reality is we will never know. And that comes back to the, I think, how seriously does the talent team take their role in the entire world of career? So if we don't do it, we must be aware of the fact that we are playing with people's lives. That's just one thing I wanted to mention. So we are not allowed to do it, but the reality is it's hard to tell. The transparency piece is absolutely essential. Where are we using artificial intelligence? What tools are we using? How are we using them? Why are we using them? And what is the impact on the candidate throughout the recruitment process? How does it benefit them? And I heard at a conference, I heard actually Siemens mentioning this, which I was really surprised by. They are using an AI note taker for interviews, and they are actually sending to the candidates the entire recording and the notes from the interviews, which I find absolutely fascinating and a wonderful practice, giving people the chance to come back and say, I didn't mean that, or it wasn't captured correctly, or, oh, do I have a chance to change my answer, and things like that. So I think this not only obviously creates a wonderful bond with the candidates, but it allows for any errors to be reviewed, and it gives people the chance to come back on things. Another thing I wanted to mention on the use of AI from our end in talent acquisition on reviewing various things through the recruitment process. So we can look at candidates, and I know people are doing that. We can look at the CVs and not only putting them through plagiarism software. Some people do that. I don't know how relevant it is. So again, I would go back to something I said before. I would rather make sure that our processes are watertight, rather than trying to use as many AI tools as possible to try to avoid having people using AI when they apply for our jobs. I think I would leave it to that for now.
Lovely, thank you. I hadn't heard that Siemens story before, and I think that's brilliant. As many people know from my recent podcast with Ellie Long of Rolls-Royce, I'm a big advocate of transparency and giving people information in advance, but also information afterwards about how they performed and what you learnt about them. And I think that is a sort of wonderful fundamental starting point on this, which is about transparency. I do think that you highlighted there's lots of things to be considering around decision making around all of this and what the EU AI Act permits and doesn't permit. And people have to be very, very careful, even whether it's a sift in or not, about who's making the decision and how that is explainable. And on that note, Siobhan, how are you? I was sitting in the public sector as well. I imagine that you've got additional constraints, checks and balances that you have to think through about using AI. So how are you using AI in the process, and what are the considerations that you're having to work through?
Yeah, as you rightly said, being a public sector organisation, we are in the public eye, and I suppose to some extent we are held to sort of a higher regard in terms of our activities. Going back to sort of what Martin said around you know, the different phases of adoption, and, you know, really just starting off with, you know, the low risk activity. That was certainly very much the approach that my team took. So in terms of some of the tools that we've developed and deployed, it's been very much just around like job advert and job spec creation, and trying to help our recruiters and our hiring managers create those job descriptions that are very much on brand in terms of our employer value proposition, and to also really try and think about the language that's used in that, and you know, getting that feedback in terms of inclusive language within our job adverts. And, you know, not just sort of dusting out something that's been used 5 years ago that worked then and they think is going to work now. And so just getting people to think about it in that way. And the other sort of tool that we've used is sort of around talent insights, and how we can really use that to sort of explore diverse talent pools. And we've very much come from that. We want to create diverse talent pools, we want diverse talent pipelines, and so that's been very much at the forefront of everything that we've done. And of course, you know, with those tools has come guidance on how to use them, and very much a big you know, sort of statement within that is that this is a tool that may create a good first draft, or, you know, that initial sort of first step in your research, but it absolutely must have that human oversight, and that, you know, this is a tool to augment and to not replace you. You know, you are the professional, i.e. the recruiter. So therefore, you know, do use it. It will help you to speed up, you know, some of the more manual tasks that you're doing, so that you can then really add value. You can add that human touch to, you know, just whether it's picking up the phone to a candidate and speaking to them, and allowing more time for that. So we wanted to start off very much with those low risk tools to also to get people comfortable with using these different types of tools and this new technology, and to then understand where the opportunities are, but actually where are the limitations for the likes of AI, because it's not great at everything. So, you know, we've very much again used it as that education piece, and to build our team's AI literacy from that aspect. And obviously there's a lot of talk around, you know, should we be using AI to sift CVs or applications or whatever it may be? And of course, as we've rightly said, that there's a lot of consideration around that, and there's a lot of considerations with law. And whilst in the UK we are not legally bound by the EU AI Act, there are still very much laws in place that are applicable. So GDPR, Data Protection Act, where, you know, how we use people's data, so candidate data comes under that. You know, there are strict guidelines, so it certainly isn't something that we can just steam ahead with without giving that any due consideration. And of course, you know, there are other sort of guidance out there from the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology on sort of like responsible AI in recruitment, which, if you haven't seen, is a really good resource as well. And so there is so much to consider. And as Martin and Andrea rightly pointed out, anything that we do, you know, it must be transparent, and we must explain what we are doing with candidates' data, and how we are using that technology if and when that, you know, that time does come. And I suppose whilst my team are using AI as more at the low risk side, I still think actually it's certainly a takeaway that I'm going to take for my team, is that yes, we openly speak about the tools that we're using and have deployed, but actually that's something we need to put on our career site as well. So it's certainly you know, a point that I'm going to take away as well from today. So thank you for that.
Not at all, Siobhan. I'm glad that even the panelists are finding today's session useful. I'm going to challenge you, if you don't mind, with one question, because I'm sure that this is a burning question for many people. You talked about augmenting. you talked about helping, you've got low risk in this. Do you consider then CV matching? Because you talked about that a bit, and do you see that as something that could be done by AI? And yeah, what would you be factoring in? Because we had a couple of people on there that are using AI to screen CVs, lots of people who are still experimenting. So what's your take on AI tools screening CVs?
I mean, it's certainly a possibility in terms of sort of once you've sort of gone under the layers and really understood actually what it is or how the AI is working. So I think anything sort of out of the box, like just putting it into ChatGPT, for example, I think that's not the best use at all, because there's this whole black box on how Gen AI is coming to to its outputs. And if we were then to be challenged on that in terms of, well, you've rejected me because you said that my CV hasn't
Yes.
matched the skills that are required, you can't explain that if you've used something like ChatGPT. So and I'm going to quote Martin here, because I thought your great your podcast a while back really sort of hits this point in terms of you need to be in control of the algorithm, and I think you need to really set those strict parameters in terms of that sort of rules-based approach of this is everything that this is how you need to make that decision, and this is how a human would make that decision. So if you can then explain that and you're transparent with it, so it comes back to those two important elements, then yes, that's something that could be possible, but of course would need a lot of consideration around that. And again, just coming back to the simplistic matching, I still think that there would absolutely need to be that human oversight, to make sure, because I think it still could be quite subjective as well on that. So yes, possible, but of course, not just something that is an out of the box solution. This would something that would, you'd really need to be able to explain that process.
No, and I love your point about stay in control of the algorithm. That should be, one of the great quotes from today. I'm conscious of time on this one, and we've got the third topic around this, which I need to just quickly bring up. So let me. And so I'm just going to bring up here the third part of our session, but we're going to keep this super short, which was, how is AI changing the things that we're going to need to assess for? So in less than 1 minute or less, and I'm sorry to put you under this kind of pressure, but I want to just finish off the session and with the things for people can take away from this and share. So if I just quickly start with Andrea, what do you think that we're going to need to start thinking about, the things that are important from traits that we're going to need to look for in the future in an AI-enabled workplace?
Emotional intelligence. Say, I will not look at what things we need to develop to be better at using AI. I would look at the other side of things. So emotional intelligence, which everything that goes into emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, which is something we should still be better than AI at some point, and building an offline strong relationship network. So taking things offline, there was a question addressed earlier about this as well, where maybe we do things also offline, a bit more to understand how to strengthen human-to-human relationships.
Nice, lovely. 3 really good things. Martin, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. So obviously, as I mentioned, I've developed a tool that helps kind of assess how people are working with AI tools. And one of the things that we look for is not just, what's your prompting skills like, but actually how do you prompt? Because we see prompting, or I specifically see prompting as an important skill, but it's broken down into those kind of micro skills around, like you've got their problem solving, creativity, but also decision making, also delegation and coaching as well. Because whether you like it or not, the best way to use AI is to use it as an assistant. And if you do have an assistant sitting there, you should be good at delegating tasks to them, and you should be very good at coaching them through those tasks as well.
Brilliant, great thoughts. And I'm sure people will look up afterwards about the tool GenAssess that you've developed, because one of the first in the market around that, and clearly something that's going to be very valuable to people in the future. Siobhan, have you got anything further to add to that as well?
For me, I'd say critical curiosity. And I think what I mean by that is, of course, having that curiosity. There's so many different iterations and rapid developments of technology, and I don't think that's going to slow anytime soon. But of course, being that critical thinking piece in terms of the outputs and ensuring that we really do understand and trust, what the tools that we are using. And just to add on to Martin's point there around the delegation side, getting used to almost to managing AI agents, really. That I think that'll be a completely new skill, for people to sort of work around. So I think that'll be really interesting. And just to finally add, again, the people skills, that's going to be super important as well.
It is, and it goes back to Andrea's point around all of this, which is we will still be employing people to work with other people, and so we mustn't forget those human interaction skills too, where relevant. Wonderful, some really good thoughts on that. We're going to wrap things up now. There is a couple of useful elements here as well for you to take away, but also would be lovely for those that still online, just if you could answer this poll that will be very helpful to us to learning the value that you've got from today, and that hopefully the format for you has worked out as a way to gather interesting perspectives on some of the key themes. This has been recorded, and so we will be sending out the link to people afterwards. And before I finish off and thank everybody, perhaps Ben, you could just close the poll and let us know where people ended up. More confident, some a little bit same before, maybe some experts in there. I'm glad, that people aren't less confident afterwards. So that is definitely down to some of the great advice that our panelists have been sharing. So on that note, thank you everybody for joining the TA Disruptors live webinar. We hope you found it really useful, but I really want to thank our panelists, Andrea, Siobhan, Martin. As always, you have all been super clear. You've given some brilliant advice. There's some takeaways for all of us from this. And I hope everybody who has been listening into this will connect with all of these people, because they have been pioneering on many of the things that many people have been wrestling with, and so we've been very lucky to hear from them and get their thoughts. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.